Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we're back on the update 1.91 second dev server, and it's time to have a look at the G.91 R. This is a new vehicle which is coming to the German tree in update 1.91, and it's very similar to the vehicles that you see in the Italian tree. It has some interesting things which are the same, others which are not, so let's get into it. So first of all, it's a rank 5 battery rating 9.0 vehicle, and where it finds itself in the tech tree is actually after the Horton of all things. So it's kind of in this like pseudo attacker line that we have here, and it's also labeled a jet fighter. So it's kind of odd that it's here, but I suppose when you look at the rest of the tech trees, there's not really anywhere else where you can put it, you know. Maybe you put it after the Pulkistora if you decide it's more of an attacker than a fighter, but still it kind of makes sense where it is. On top of this as well, it is the first vehicle that we have which has access to AS20 Nords for the Germans in a very aggressive sense. If you have a look at any of the other top tier vehicles, there is no guided munitions that you can find from them, which means that this is the first step for Germany when it comes to these AGM ideas. Of course, it has air-to-airs with the CL-13B, but with the air-to-ground idea, it hasn't really been explored. So this will be the first CAS machine, really, that the Germans get, and it's coming at 9.0 for them. If we have a look at the engine, we have the Bristol Orpheus MK or Mark 803 jet engine with 2190 kgf. Above that, you have the oil cooling system, some fuel tanks which cover the majority of the fuselage. Then you have some small fuel tanks as well, and then after that you got two DEFers. Now, this is one of the major differences between the G91s in the Italian tree and the German G91. You can see that the R1 has Brownings, the Pre-Series has Brownings, the G91 of course has DEFers in the form of the YS, but just as a standard G91 at 9.0, this is the first of its kind with the DEFer 5.52s. And if you've ever used the 5.52s, incredibly powerful guns, very nice at killing pretty much anything. I would say they're on par with stuff that you see on the Swift, like the Aidens. Very, very good 30mm. So with that said, it has 250 rounds, of that 125 per gun, crazy fire rate of 1200 rounds per minute, so you can definitely burn through them quickly if you aren't paying attention. And if we look at the general armor profile of the machine, it's got this kind of body around the pilot to try and keep them alive, only 6.5mm though, bulletproof glass of 40mm, which is once again okay. Then it has these little blocks at the bottom of 6.5mm each, so nothing to really write home about in the armor department. Where it becomes interesting is, of course, the general performance of this plane. So flight performance, at least in my opinion, would be the one to go for, because at 9.0 for the Germans, you have some interesting options. You know, you got the 9.3 CL-13A Mark V, which was the best jet in the game for an incredibly long time. Then, of course, you have the MiG-15 BIS, which just got moved down to 8.7. You've got the Me-262Cs with their boosters. They're very fun to use. And the CL-13B Mark VI at 9.3. So if you want to reduce your BR a little bit and also be incredibly competent, you know, the G91 R3 at 9.0 is not a bad shout. I think it's a great machine for what it is, which is, you know, kind of a pseudo Sabre in a way, just a very small one, more maneuverable, and it will work very well in the German tech tree. A lot of people have been saying how the German tech tree is becoming an area of it's becoming an area of a dumping ground for other nations. Well, welcome to history. You know, it's an unfortunate thing, you know, for the Germans, but they did lose the war, and that means that when it came to production and stuff, they had to look into other areas. Looking at the secondary armaments, which is, you know, at least in my opinion, going to be its primary role, because as we said, like, the Germans just don't have a CAS at top tier, so this is going to become a pseudo CAS, which can also turn into an air superiority fighter once the Nords are done. But you have the FSB Mark Vs, 250-pounders, the 500-pounders, the Nords, as we talked about, and also the SNEB rockets. So the SNEB rockets, I would definitely say I would have taken them, but you don't really get enough of them. You only get 38 in total, meaning that That's just not enough, in my opinion. I think 4 Nords, if you can get at least 2 guaranteed kills there, are much better than the Snebs. The Snebs do pen a hell of a lot. The Nords don't pen as much, but they have way more explosive mass in the form of TNT, 29.9 kilos, where these only have 900. So with the Nords, you can hit and overmatch many vehicles in the ground, taking them out incredibly well. On top of this, we talked about the bombs, 2 500s or 4 250s. This is what they look like. So they're not, new school bombs, they're old style. And also the guns, you got a default belt, which is great, AP, and then you can pretty much just pick your poison. Do you want HE, do you want AP, or do you want stealth, which is a mixture of both? For me, air targets is the way to go, just because the way I would use this machine, as I said, is first of all, get into the combat area, make sure that you, as an individual, are able to get off at least 1 or 2 nodes to be able to attack the enemies down below in ground realistic, and then from there, try your best to be able to fight the air superiority battle. That's basically what I would do in this machine, and that's how I would play. If we're talking about a machine which is set up for air realistic, I don't think I'd take the Nords at all. I don't think I'd take any secondary armaments, and instead just use the Defers with the 250 rounds. Which, yes, you'll run into quickly. You'll run out of quickly, but it won't be too much of a hassle, in my opinion. So takeoff is simple, and one of the things that with the G91s is they're incredibly easy to fly. The machines that you find now in the Italian tree and now the German tree, if you've ever flown them, they have great maneuverability, they have wonderful acceleration, and they also complement sabers incredibly well. The defensive flying aspect of the G91 can never be overlooked, especially for inexperienced players like myself when it comes to jets. It also has the flame if you want it, but it's only from 1% of 101% thrust. So you can see at 100% we're fully out on the flame, and also we have this grey smoke. If we go to 101, which is as max as it goes, we get the good old black smoke and the flame out the back. So it's really up to what you want to do. But the Nords definitely slow the G91 down quite a lot, so make sure that you are ready for that. Otherwise you're going to be in a scenario where you're going to be low, slow, and hoping to survive. Another thing as well is, since for me this is going to be used as a ground pounder, that you need a kind of pseudo 9-0 lineup to run around, and one of the things the Germans aren't great at is a 9-0 lineup. You do have the KBZ-70, you also have a bunch of 8.7s you can throw into the mix, but nobody wants to take their 8.7s into possibly 9-0 battles, and that is something that you can easily do if you are in a plane like this at 9-0. So for me, when I have a think about it, I would much rather just run this with a 9.7 or a 10-0 lineup and end up in a scenario where this is my, pseudo air superiority fighter and also pseudo ground attacker, because there isn't really any other options for Germany, and it's something that a lot of people have been crying out for a long time to have, some form of machine which can do both roles, or even just do one of the roles, which is ground attack, because your other option that you can bring, it's the Arado, of all things. The Arado is the last machine that you can bring, which really does this ground attack role well. So bringing in another machine into the game, which has access to Nords, which has access to something that does take a little bit of skill in the form of the Nords, or you just don't bring them, and instead what you do is you fight with something else, such as just your guns. I think it's a nice little touch to add to the German tree. And obviously, they used it. It was used extensively by the Germans, and if you look at the other options that they have, there aren't many out there. So even though the G91's been very powerful for a very long time, depending on which form that you look at, whether it's the YS or whether it's the other versions in the Italian tree, I do think it's nice to see that we have a German one with us as well. Whether it's going to perform as well, that's obviously going to be seen on the live server. The other question we also have to ask ourselves is the meta vehicles that are around right now, the Hunter F6, the G91YS, are they going to openly accept something like this, or are they going to have to fight us? That's always a question that we have to think about when we're looking at top tier jets, because right now it's much more of a mixed experience where a lot of the time you're either fighting yourself or you're fighting very similar compositions. Where does this fit into that? Does it get down tiered more into that 8-7 area, or does it get up tiered into the 10-0 area? These are all questions which I'm sure will be answered very quickly when it comes to the update. And if it's a scenario where this thing gets up tiered a lot into stuff like Phantom 2s, into MiG-21s, MiG-19s, even the G.91 YSs, or even the Hunter F6, I think it has a bad time. But if it's a machine that does not get down tiered but sticks around 8.7 and 9.0, it definitely has a chance of being incredibly fun to the average person. The balance of the G91 has always been great as it came into the game. One of the easiest jets to use when it comes to its speed, when it comes to its maneuverability and its general acceleration. And to see another one in game just means another one which I feel comfortable flying, which I tell you does not happen a lot in jets. There aren't many jets out there where I think, yeah, I can do well in this. But the G91 will always be one of those where I think, yeah, I have this. I can annihilate the enemy. I can either defensively fly and watch him fly past me and follow him, or I can just pull some crazy maneuvers and there's not a lot he can do. And that is, at least for me, the key to the G91. I suppose good control of the overload also helps at some point. Maybe I need a better crew on this one. Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.
I'd just like to thank Ambrosius McClellan, B. Young, Blackie, Daniel Stanton, John Ryman, Joseph Anders, Martinez, Mopar 1969, Moxie, Super Cacti, Uyans Terry, and Elove Goats, and of course Seductive Trash Can for supporting the channel.